great. Everyone's really friendly. So it's really good. I'm really happy.
Nice, awesome.
What about you? How was the weekend?
Weekend was great. I was in Chicago. Got back to Florida yesterday, so I got to enjoy some nice cold in Chicago. But it was good.
Okay. Yeah, some nice cold, enjoying some nice cold. That's only people
I
from
I,
Florida
I
can
love
say
it.
that. Because normally it's the opposite for me. I'm like, I really enjoy being in warm weather, but yeah, it's you understand when you're always in warm weather, it's better to get in the cold.
It is. We like to change once in a while.
Yeah, exactly. Good. So I think we can get started. We are live on YouTube. We also live on Zoom. And like attendees can jump and jump in, jump out. I have a few questions I collected here, but before we dive in, can you maybe tell us a bit more about yourself, who you are, and yeah, tell us about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. So obviously, my name's Adam J. I am the VP of Sales at Spot On. We are a small and medium-sized business technology company. We specialize in marketing automation, review management. We have a restaurant platform as well, and then also merchant processing. I've been here just about 7 months. Prior to that, about 10 to 12 years in sales and executive sales leadership. A few years in the tech space, and I spent most of my career, obviously, in the healthcare space, working for a medical device company based out of Boston, focusing on women's healthcare. Really decided that I loved the technology aspect more than the physician aspect. Physicians are a unique group of people to deal with. And I've been trying to build high performance sales teams, based on leadership development and outstanding culture ever since.
Okay. So can you tell me a bit more about the why physicians are such a specific group of people?
Yeah, absolutely. So doctors are interesting, man. When you look at them, a lot of them, and this not a knock on physicians. There's some great doctors out there, but a lot of them feel that there's a superiority complex. They look at reps as a necessary evil because it's the only way to get the product in the door. But when they're interacting with reps, there's really no respect. You're not providing them with what they perceive as a value proposition. And if we go back to sales and we look at reps who are successful in sales, it's all about reps who are able to provide their customers with value. They're able to show value, they're able to articulate value, and there's a mutually beneficial relationship where your customer or your prospect is getting value from you and your product. You're obviously getting value from them in a signed contract. With physicians, you're kind of that necessary evil. We can't get the product without going through the rep. So they go through you, but it really just comes down to what are you going to sell it to me for and the price. There's nothing you can teach me about it, nothing you can teach me about anything. And it's a very difficult environment to work in.
Okay. And so do you think that if the rep, do you think it's possible to actually remove the rep and make the experience like better or simpler for the doctor, or not really?
So it's funny, in some ways, yes. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry specifically, not the medical device industry, they have done just that. They've really started eliminating pharmaceutical reps, and now doctors will go online. They'll get the training that they need online from the pharmaceutical company's website, enter all the certification information in, and just have their samples shipped to them. I started my career, oddly enough, in pharmaceutical sales. And when you're in pharmaceutical sales, we would go in, it was before all these regulations, right? We would cater these fantastic lunches for doctors, take them out to these amazing dinners, and do all these great things. And, through the pharma regulations, they eliminated all that. Yeah. And what you found is doctors didn't want to talk to reps anymore. If I can't take you out to a $200 steak dinner, what use do you have for me? So now doctors go online and they order their samples there. In the medical device space, I think for some devices, yes. I think the more specialized you get, so if you're in cardiac, if you're in spine, if you're in lasers, you do need that rep there to teach you how to use the device. In the simpler aspects of medical device, you really don't. So in those aspects, it wouldn't surprise me if you see one of a couple things happen. Reps eliminated altogether, or with technology where it's going, instead of having, a field force of 500 reps like we had at Hologic, you have, a smaller number of reps that work inside. You have your little iPad on a stand that zooms in and your rep is there virtually. But you could really reduce payroll and you could take advantage of modern technology and, transform what we know as enterprise sales, where we do everything over Zoom, and transform that to the healthcare space.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Also, it's crazy because I think healthcare is one of the only place where, where like doctors are a bit more protected than other professions. But for example, you take radiology, diagnostics are often done better by AI and robots than doctors. And
Absolutely.
so it's quite impressive for me. I'm like, I really don't like doctors because of, especially in Germany, because they just are, one thing they don't understand is how to deal with people. So whenever you arrive into a doctor's office, you have something, and for you it's a big thing because it's your body. You're not used to it.
Yep.
They see that day in day out. So for them, it's like it's normal. It's nothing, and they just don't understand. I explained that one day I actually schooled the doctor, and I say, "You're treating me like I'm just a piece of meat or whatever. Like this is something that I'm not used to. You need to actually go and explain me what it is, why it is, and why it's not something, not a big deal. Because you see that every day. I don't." And he was like, "Oh yeah, you're right." I say, "Yeah, it's not because you have like a white, how you call that, blues or like this white thing
Lab
that,
coat. Yep.
yeah, that you're,
But
you're."
if you translate that to sales, that's actually what a lot of reps do to their customers, right? They don't understand that you have to show the value. You have to articulate the problem. You have to understand the customer's needs and why the customer wants to talk to you before you just bring in your solution. Ideally, you don't go to a doctor's office and they don't say, "Oh, your stomach hurts, we're going to do surgery." Like we go through this process, and we need to translate how physicians should, not always, but how physicians should be treating their patients, very similar to how we need to treat our prospects and our customers.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, that's quite similar actually. Yeah. So we have some questions there that I collected. So the first one is like, because we're going to talk about remote and building a sales culture.
Sure.
So one is like, how can you build a culture when everyone is remote?
It's a great question, and it's one that we get asked a lot. I've managed remote sales teams for about 10 years. I am one of those people that have never worked in an office, and I give credit to everyone who does. I don't see how anyone does it. But there's a couple things that you can do to really build that culture remotely. And it starts with making everyone feel like they are part of a team. So I start our week, every Monday morning, we do a Zoom meeting. It's our weekly stand-up. We bring everyone together. And yes, we go through numbers, we talk about the previous week, we talk about next week and our goals. But I think one of the things that's really important is you have to also talk about people and get to know people. So I always started off with shout outs, and my shout outs are very specifically not tied to sales performance. It's not, "Oh, Adam, closed a big deal last week," or, "Adam, closed the deal he's been working on for 6 months." It could be, "Mary got a new puppy," or "Billy got engaged," or, "Bob went traveling." And I think it's really important, especially when you're remote, that you bring in people's personal lives and people realize that you're more than just that person who's selling. You're more than just that teammate. We all have, families and unique situations, that things that were never acceptable before COVID. At some time during this hour this morning, it's very likely my 9-year-old will come trotting in here, even though my door is closed. And 9 months ago, a year ago, that wouldn't be acceptable, right? You'd shoo him out and be like, "Dude, why are you coming in here?" And now it humanizes you. It is acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think that as a sales leader, you need to encourage that. It's okay when you're on a Zoom that your kid comes in the room. It's okay that your pet's in the background. We have to make people feel like we are all one and we're all going through the same thing. I think that other than normal stand-ups, one of the things that's really important is, open Zoom sessions for coaching, where we will all get on Zoom, everyone will mute themselves, and if someone has something that's going on, they'll unmute themselves. And then we could all work together, and collectively, even though we're not in the same space, we are in the same space via Zoom.
Mhm.
I do not quite monthly, probably semi-monthly happy hours, where, at the end of the day, the end of the week on a Friday, we will all just hop on Zoom and hang out and chat. And it's okay to have your bourbon or your vodka or whatever it is you want, because it's the end of the day. And I think the biggest thing is really showing that human side and getting people to interact with one another other than through email or Slack or through the phone. And celebrating the wins. It's even more important in a remote environment to celebrate the wins. And when someone has a win, you need to highlight that and highlight them and make them feel valued, because the wins they're harder to come by right now. Regardless of what anyone says, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And anyone who doesn't realize that, or any sales leader who just tells their reps to go out there and just sell and don't worry about, COVID-19, I think is a little naive. So when we get a win, or we come up with an idea or a unique strategy that is allowing people to overcome what we're going through collectively as a nation and in the world, needs to be celebrated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. I like the idea of doing these kind of open Zoom sessions. Have you tried breakout rooms also, where, because let's say if you have a junior rep and maybe someone who's not that confident to expose, like to be vulnerable in public, do you have these things too?
We do. So we do a couple things with breakout rooms. We use them pretty frequently in our onboarding, where we'll segment out by manager. But we do exactly to your point. One of the things we've experimented with is taking a junior rep and putting them on Zoom with a senior rep. And I find that it actually works better than if I were to get, or if one of my managers were to get on the phone with a rep, because they are willing to be more vulnerable with another rep versus a manager. There's that feeling that, oh, I can't ask my manager this because they're going to think I'm stupid, or I don't know, or I didn't study enough. And they always, it's like when your manager comes and travels with you in the field, right? For field sales, you put on the show, right? I'm going to take my manager to all my best customers and they're going to tell them how great I am. And I fell into that as a rep. So one of the things I encourage reps to do in the field is the same as Zoom. I don't want to hear your best calls. I don't want to go to your best customers. Take me to people who tell you no. Take me to people who don't like you. Take me to where you're struggling, because that's how we're going to coach you as a leadership team to get better. So when you're on the phone or on Zoom with a senior rep, I find that people are willing to be more vulnerable and expose themselves more, because there's not that fear that, oh, my manager is going to think I'm not doing a good job.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I think that's great, and definitely, like, for me, as you said, if you have your manager coming with you, you're always going to show off and try to take to the best customers, and it doesn't really help. So yeah, I think it's interesting. What about tools? So what kind of tools do you use to track the activity of your team remotely and make sure everyone's aligned?
So that's an interesting question for us. We are actually the first company I've worked at that does not use Salesforce. So I'm used to being able to go into Salesforce and I can see every report that I want to see. We have a homegrown system that our founders used at their previous company that they brought over here. For us, it works. But I think that it's even more important when you're not using Salesforce and you're not using automated systems, that you do put tools and reporting in place. I'm a big believer that metrics only tell part of the story, right? I could look at how many calls you have, how many connects you have, how many quotes you've sent, contracts are signed, deals you've won. All of those are great metrics, and they're all things that you should look at. But you have to get intimately familiar with each of your managers and each of your players to understand the story behind it. So for example, if our target is, let's just say 30 calls a day, and we have a rep who only made 21 calls, it's very easy for myself or one of my managers to get on the phone and say, hey, Billy, you only made 21 calls, man. You've got to have 30 calls. This is unacceptable. Well, that's going to put Billy down. He's going to feel like garbage, which we don't want to do. And a different approach is, hey, Billy, normally you're consistently around 30 to 40 calls. You had 21 calls today. Talk to me about that. I'm assuming you had some great calls that went longer. Like, I'm really excited to hear about those. And by flipping that script and diving into the metrics versus just the number itself, you're going to find a lot more data, and you're going to start treating people like a human being. But I think one of the things you really need to look at and things you need to measure, I'm not a big believer of measuring number of calls. I like number of connects and number of decision maker conversations. I think that's much more important. If you make 100 calls a day, that really doesn't impress me. I want to know how many people you're talking to and what are those conversations like. I think conversion rates are critically important. So from demo to quote, what does that conversion rate look like? And what that allows us to do is really understand if reps are struggling with bottom of funnel or top of funnel activities. If you have a gazillion calls, but they're not converting into real opportunities, we know that there's probably something going on with your talk track with that call that people aren't getting interested. And we can coach to that. And we could coach to developing that talk track and really being able to create opportunities. Conversely, if you're creating a ton of opportunities, you're doing a ton of demos, but your quote, your contract, and your win ratios are extremely low, we know that you're great at that top of funnel stuff, but what we really need to work on is what are we not articulating in our demo and in our discovery and our needs analysis that get people to want to move forward. So I think those are the metrics that I really like to look at, much more than just what is the call or how many opportunities or how many wins did you have. You really got to look at conversion rate and time and stage.
Okay. Okay.
And for us,
And
it's manual. Yeah. We live in Google Sheets.
Okay. Okay. And is it something you want to keep doing, or moving further that you think that's going to be an issue?
So I'm a big pusher of Salesforce or whatever automation system you want. I think that to rapidly scale a business and to scale a business effectively, you have to put automation in place. You have to put reporting in place. I think what we have for being a Series C startup right now, it got us where we are. Moving forward, we absolutely are going to have to invest in some type of automation, be it Salesforce or anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think this is with Salesforce is crazy because like I have a very I think it's you actually anyway you always end up on Salesforce. Everyone hates it though, but it's crazy because we have to use it because and we all end up there, and all the great tools like Gong, Salesloft, Outreach, they're all connected to, they are made to work with Salesforce. So
Yeah.
so it's always, that's a big issue. Is that,
Salesforce rules the world, and it's funny, like you Gong, Salesloft, Outreach, you talk about all the tools that I love, that I wish I had the access to, that are really game changing and industry changing. And if you want to get the most out of them, to your point, you have to connect back to Salesforce. Salesforce has done a great job, right? Salesforce to us is what Google is to the world. Like you think reports, you think Salesforce. I think search, I think Google.
Yeah, exactly. So we have here a question, when everything comes back to not remote, how will that affect the culture you have in your company?
Yeah, so for us, I don't think it will, to be honest. I think that if you're doing this right, and if you're building culture correctly from day one, and that starts not with onboarding, that starts with the interview process, right? Candidates have the ability and should interview us as much as we interview them. I think it's really important. That tells me a lot about a candidate, how much they're interviewing me and what they want to know about the company and the culture. But I think if you're doing it right from interview process through onboarding, through remote, even when we go back to not remote, there shouldn't be a whole lot that changes other than some of the things we do over Zoom, we do in person. If you're getting people to know each other well now, if you're having these meetings, these happy hours, these lunch and learns, and really focusing on people and continuing to focus on employee development, there shouldn't be that much of a fundamental shift when we make the change back to onsite. I believe the change is going to take a long time, though. I think it's great that we have a vaccine that it looks like it's going to get approved this week and start shipping, to the urgent population by December, to the broader population by April. But I think what's going to happen is, and we were talking before we started, I just flew home from Chicago this weekend, and everyone's wearing masks. The federal government isn't going to be able to mandate vaccines. But what's going to happen is you're going to find businesses and airlines and everything saying you can't come in unless you have a vaccine. And however long that goes on until we get out of Corona, I think we're going to be in a remote environment for quite a while. And we need to adapt to it. We need to understand it. And I think what this has shown us is that even when coronavirus is over, we can operate effectively in a remote environment. I think, you have companies like Slack and Twitter and Google who are saying that people can work from home for a year, or Twitter, Facebook, they could work from home forever. It's shown us that we can be successful in a remote environment. I would not want to be a commercial real estate broker right now.
Yeah, sure. That must be pretty tough for them. But I mean, I think it's what I love right now is I mean we have this kind of remote first that is great, but what I love is also we'll be able to develop, and I've seen some technology around that on a hybrid first, let's say, where you can, because the diversity in your day-to-day is also what makes it great. I think when you can change and you can change the environment. Let's say you wanted to spend 2-3 times working from home, so you can also take care of your kids, and and it's a lot easier. Maybe you want to have 2 days of group work and or focused work somewhere else. I think this is great, and there's some great technology around that. I've seen. Have you heard of the Owl? It's called. It's kind of like Amazon, like it's kind of like how do you call that? A speaker like thing with 4 cameras. you put it onto a table, and there's like a meeting happening. And then whenever someone talks, it detects the person speaking. The cameras are kind of like switching to this person, and then it focuses and checks this person. And you can see the rest, and it's really great. And it's made for hybrid.
I've heard of it. It makes it look like you're actually in the room with whoever's talking. Yeah. I think
and you have different things. Yeah.
You brought up a good point with hybrid. And I think as we start to transition back to on-site, that's what you're going to see, right? You're going to see, I'll call it A/B teams, but maybe it's A, B, C, D, where, excuse me, I don't think we're going to get back anytime soon to everyone being in the office every day. Mm-hmm. What you'll see is, this team will be here this day, this team will be here that day. And to your point of a hybrid mentality, where sometimes you are in the office, sometimes you're working from home, and we'll be able to adapt to both and make both just as comfortable. I love the idea of a device that shows all the different people and makes it look like you're in a conference room, though. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. So regarding motivation, so how do you keep motivation high when everyone works from home? You have a lot of experience around that, so how do you do that?
Yeah, that's probably the toughest one. Is how do you get people to want to work? I think it's different in sales, right? Salespeople, we're compensated by what we bring in. Mm-hmm. Even if you have a base salary, it's probably not what you're surviving off of. So in sales, I think that motivation's there. I think where it really comes into play is when you start looking at your success support, teams that are working from home that aren't incented by money and by deals closed. And I think that to a lesser extent, it certainly is sales folks. And I think this is where constant communication comes in. And you have to be very careful that constant communication isn't micromanaging. And again, going back to numbers, not telling a story. We don't ever want to call someone, and I don't look at anyone's talk time. And my C-suite is going to be really upset when they hear this. But my leadership style is very candid and very transparent. I don't care about talk time. At the end of the day, I'm not the manager who's going to say, you were only on the phone for 6 hours and 26 minutes and made XYZ of dials, because it doesn't tell a story. I care about the quality. And I think that if we're really focusing on motivating people at home, we got to get away from this turn them and burn them and make these calls as quick as you can mentality, and really focus on quality and getting to know people and talking to them about the real world problems that they're facing right now, and being a solution to those problems and uncovering those needs instead of just, pitching whatever it is we want to sell. But I think that every manager should reach out to their players daily. You have to have a daily touch base. Let's talk about what went well today. Let's talk about the struggles you had and how I can help you with that. And then I think manager availability is even more important now than it ever was. When we were all in the office, everyone's busy, right? But there's 26 people that you could go ask questions to because they're right behind you or right next to you. You don't have that now. I tell my team, I'm typically on, I think I have 22 Zoom meetings today. But so I use Apple products. I have my text messaging up on my screen all day long. Text me or Slack me, and I'll answer you immediately, no matter what's going on. And I think that availability is really important to motivation, because your team needs to see that even though we're remote, you're home as well, or you're working as well, you're available as well. But it also goes back to what we spoke about earlier. You have to celebrate those wins. You have to encourage dialogue, not just between yourself and your team, but between the team and one another. And you have to have a little bit of fun. I think fun is the most important part to keep people motivated right now. At the end of the day, you could tie this to hiring, right? I say, people ask, what's the two most important things that you look for when you're hiring? Number one is coachability. I think that no matter what the level is that you come in at, you have to be coachable. But number two is work ethic. And even more important with remote work, listen, we could teach you whatever the product is we're selling, whatever our sales process is, whatever our customer service process is. I can't teach you to get up and go to work every day. And I think it's really important when we interview people and when we're talking to people and when we're coaching people, that we really focus on that work ethic and how it's even more important now than it ever was, that we're hiring people with those strong work ethics who want to make a difference, and that we're rewarding them for doing so.
And so what do you think then? Because one thing I've noticed is that work ethic is it's something you have, but also there's also something you can acquire as you work. And often when you're very junior or it's a first time job, you don't really know how it looks like, or it's very challenging to to kind of find that. And whenever it's remote, I think for me, if I had to imagine like when I started working in sales, it was fully remote, that would have been really challenging for me. So how do you make sure you find this work ethic in young people, let's say, or junior people, and make sure it works on remote?
Yeah, I think so. Part of it is leading from the front, right? You have to lead from the trenches, you have to lead from the front, and you have to show that you are willing to work harder than anyone that's on your team. I'm a big believer that as a sales leader, you should be the first person in, the last person out, barring rare exceptions. But I think that a lot of leaders kind of work in secret, right? No one knows what I'm doing all day. No one, they just see my calendar and they just see busy, 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 busy. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't tell them anything. I have an open calendar. My calendar is not private. If I have like an HR related event, I will mark it private so people can't see it. But I think that level of transparency is a great way to teach work ethic. People see that you are open and transparent, that listen, this is what I'm doing all day. I'm not taking a 4-hour break to, go play PlayStation or whatever it is people happen to do. But I think that transparency, and I think that as you continue to work with people and you show them that you're willing to put in the time, you're willing to put in the effort, you're willing to get on the phone with customers, you're willing to coach them and develop them. That's how you start to build work ethic. No one wants to work harder than the person that they're working for. It's not a good feeling. I've done it. I've worked for bosses that I'm on the phone with them. It's like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm skiing down the slopes. Like, must be nice. Weren't you doing that last week? And you're running a company for someone that's supposed to be running a company. Yeah. When you bring people in and you involve them in the day-to-day and you involve them in what you're doing and you work with them and coach them and let them see what you're doing, I think that's what starts it from a young age. But I also think that part of it is intrinsic, right? You either have it or you don't. You can teach it, to your point. There's people who don't know what it looks like, but unfortunately, there's just some people who don't have it.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said. Like that's why I don't have employees and I don't want to work with employees in my company, because I'm typically the kind of guy who would be chilling and asking others to work. So I know about that, and I prefer, it's just I know about it. It's for me is, if I'm hiring you, it's like that you work for me. So I prefer working with people who have their own business and it's their thing. But yeah, it can be super challenging. It's not inspiring if you have someone who's supposed to be your leader and this person is just not doing anything. So yeah.
And I think we've all worked for them, right? We've all worked for leaders that we've tried to pick up the phone and they're never available, or they are available, and to my point, they're skiing down the slopes. I mean, how unmotivating is that? Like, you're a sales rep or a sales leader. It's the middle of a pandemic. Hey, Billy, I really need your help on this. Oh, I have to call you back. I'm in the middle of skiing. Like, what? And don't misunderstand me. Everyone deserves off time, right? We all deserve it. I'm a big fan of vacations. Take time off. Spend time with your family. Family first. I block out my calendar for an hour every day in the afternoon to go pick up my son from school and do some homework with him. I'm all for it. When it's repetitive, that someone's never available, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, exactly. And so what do you think are today's sales reps are interested in terms of culture? Because we often think about people who can maybe money motivated or money driven. They may be interested in being into a really aggressive sales environment. But what do you think are the values people are, or the interesting things in terms of culture for sales reps today?
Yeah, I think so. Money is always for sales reps something that's important. I don't really tie that to culture. I think we all want to be compensated. But when I'm talking to folks who are interviewing for roles, the things that are really important to them right now are transparency and honesty. I think people are looking for leaders who are open, who are upfront, who are transparent, and who are real. And I can't emphasize that enough. I think the days of leaders doing everything in secret and just roll, hey, here's this new program we're going to roll out, don't work. I think people want to feel like they are part of the conversation, that their voice is heard regardless of how junior or how senior they are. And your voice being heard doesn't always mean that we're going to do what you want to do, but it just means that we value your input. And I think that that's something really important from a culture standpoint. I think that diversity is even more important and critically important now, that people feel they could be themselves, that people don't have to hide who they are regardless of, age, body type, sexual orientation, color, whatever it happens to be, that we embrace you for who you are. And I think that it's sad that it's taken until 2021 to get there, where a lot of companies really do embrace that now and embrace that diversity. Back at my time at Toast, we actually had a whole separate Slack group just for various different diversity channels, and I think it gives people a sense of home, that they can be with like-minded people or different people who are open-minded, and I think that's really important. Dare I use the term work-life balance? I actually hate it when people say it to me in interviews, but it is true, right? No one wants to come to a company where they're expected to work 100% of the time. And I think when we talk about family, I'm very transparent with people that listen, like, I block out my calendar for this. If you have something with your kid, like, go do it. There is nothing more important. One of my favorite sayings in the world is, we are not curing cancer. There's nothing that can't wait an hour or two. And I've worked in a space where we were curing cancer. So I get the difference. It's okay to go be with your family. It's okay to run out and take your kids somewhere. And I think as we work in a remote environment, people really value that from a culture standpoint. And then the other thing I think that has become increasingly important is people want to know, what's that upward trajectory? What am I going to learn from you? Like, it's great that you're hiring me and I'm going to give you my all, right? I'm going to come in here and I'm going to be the #1 sales rep and make you a ton of money and make myself a ton of money. But what am I going to learn from you? What do you bring to the table as the employer? And if you can't answer that as an employer and as a leader, I think that's a cultural miss. The days of people just coming someplace to earn money are over. I find that people are coming for the learning. People will take less pay for more of a learning experience than ever before. And I think you have to really have a solid enablement program, a solid training, and a solid career development program that allows people to learn and develop their skill set in their career.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And you talked about work-life balance. I heard a concept which I think is nice, is work-life integration, where it's as you said, if you have something with your kids in the middle of, let's say, work day, you can go and do it, but then you can also be more available in other times. For me, I'm just like, I block everything in the weekend. I don't work in the weekend. I just like checking my mails sometimes here and there. But how do you personally, as a VP, kind of like keep your work-life balance, so make sure you're not always working or always on Zoom?
My other half of my kid would cringe at this question. So it's funny. I do feel like I'm always working, and it's odd because I live in West Palm Beach, Florida, so we're Eastern time. Spot On is a San Francisco-based company, so we're West Coast time.
Yeah.
So when my day is done at 5 o'clock, it's really only 2 o'clock. So it's a unique balance, and I wish I could tell you I was better at it. What I will tell you that I do on the weekends is, we all have all these devices, right? I have my watch, I have my phone, I have 4 monitors with a gazillion communication channels. I shut off my work emails on the weekend. I turn the notifications off. Typically Saturday morning when I wake up, before my son wakes up, I'll come in my office and check some emails. But other than that, I think you have to get really good at blocking off time. And whether that be work-life integration, as you say, or whether that just be proper planning for a sales rep, I think it's really important that you schedule out your time in blocks. I think it's a really good best practice. But to not always be on Zoom, I do open office hours once a week for my team, where they could just pop in and out of an open Zoom room. I think that that's really important. And I think that it's led down on people calling me, 100 million times throughout the day. But I also think it's important that whether you're a leader or whether a rep, that you set those guidelines and set those standards. My team knows that there's certain times of the day the world could be burning down, and you will not get a hold of me, and that's okay. And it's the same for reps, right? You have to lead by example. I can't tell you I'm going to take off from 1:30 to 2:30 every day, and then tell a rep you can't take off for 1:30 or 2:30 every day. I think you have to be transparent, and you have to let people do exactly what you do.
Yeah, I think it's that there's something I think is really interesting is I heard about that in what I'm doing. I'm like, I have an accelerator program where I train salespeople to actually take salespeople to start more conversations, and part of the accelerator program is a Slack channel where people can ask me questions. So they go on the Slack space domain and ask me questions. And what I found is, like, the more it goes, the more I have questions and the more time I spend there. And often, when people have direct access to you, then they just ask you everything that goes through their mind. So what I found works really well is to say, okay, every week I will actually answer every question on video on a specific day, let's say on Friday. So you can actually send me your questions here, and then I will answer them, and you will know that every Friday you're going to get your answers. And so I find when you're managing people, it doesn't work really well, but whenever in terms of expectation, that really works well, because people know they have to think a bit about their questions, and then they can go in there. And then I still open, if there's really an emergency, you can go and get in touch, but most of the time you will actually use that. How do you think that could work in the case of someone leading a team?
I love it. I think it's great. I think, that's akin almost to my open office hours, but I like the fact that they don't have to wait until open office hours, right? Throw it in your Slack, and we'll get to it. And I agree with you. If it's an emergency, you can always get a hold of me. I have a couple reps who are famous for messaging and being like, I need to talk to you, with no other concept other than I need to talk to you. And my answer is always the same. It's always like, about what? Like you wouldn't call a customer and say, hey, Adam, I need to talk to you. So I think that concept, but I like the idea of having that Slack channel where people can put their questions in, and there's this dedicated time once a week. It's almost better than kind of what I do, right? So I use Google Keep for my manager meetings that I have with my team once a week. And as I think of things to go over them, I put them in that Google Keep document, and sometimes I remember to go back to it, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of the Slack. I might very well try that. I like it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that would be a good thing. So I have one last question here is, what are mistakes people do when setting remote sales teams? So what are typical mistakes?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest mistakes you see are having no standards, no guidelines, right? When we talk about what you need to do as far as timing, no guidelines, not setting up people's days and blocks. I think it's more important when you're remote than ever to set up people's days and blocks. Not checking in is a huge mistake. Just letting people run rampant for 3, 4, 5. I've seen as high. We have a system where our managers are required to notate when they speak to their employees. And I was looking at someone the other day, and there were no notes for a month and a half. I was like, I don't believe for 1 second you didn't talk to this person for a month and a half. And they're like, oh, actually, I didn't. Well, that's a problem. So I think having those regular cadences and those regular check-ins, not having them is a huge mistake. The other one is demanding too much. I think that we have to be cognizant that people are in a remote environment. We are in a pandemic, and we can't demand too much of our teams and overwhelm them just because they're working at home and it's easier, right? You don't have that half-hour drive to work anymore. So that's an extra half hour I could get out of you to work. No, that's not the way to look at it. It's okay to shut down. And I think the biggest mistake that I've seen is people not realizing that when you work at home, things happen. We talked about it when we started. Kids are going to walk in the room. Pets are going to walk in the room. Someone's going to ring the doorbell. It's just the reality of life. And I've seen leadership get very frustrated at people that, hold on a second, I have to go, answer the door or whatever it is. That's okay. I think that we are in a place in the world where we can start embracing the fact that people have lives. I think it humanizes people. I actually love when people's kids or pets or doorbells or spouses or whoever walks in the room, because it shows you another side of the life. And I think by not acknowledging that, you're doing a real disservice to your team.
Okay. Yeah, I really like that. I think it's now it feels, for me, it feels like it's always been, it feels like it's always been like that. Sometimes I have this impression that what I'm going through now has always been the case, So like the fact that you're working remote and there's things happening is just normal now. And it feels like it's not shocking anymore. As you said before, 9 months ago, it was, not now it's not anymore. So it's very interesting, the changes it brought. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. So Adam, now I just want to give you the stage to talk about anything you want to talk. Is there anything you would like to say about you, about SpotOn, and where people can get more about you?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not my goal with doing podcasts is never to sell myself and tell someone how great I am and come work here. My philosophy is all about how do you create positive culture. How do you develop leaders, and how do you get people to either want to work for you or in an environment that fosters that growth and that leadership development? And I think that there's a lot of ways we could do that. And I think part of it is by leaders partnering together, right? Leaders talking to other leaders. One of the great things that's come out of COVID is I've connected with so many amazing people on LinkedIn and through groups like RevGenius or the Revenue Collective that I'm part of, where we could really bounce ideas and best practices off of one another. I'm always available, to chat with people. My email is super simple. It's Adam_JAY@me.com. Anyone can feel free to reach out to me, and it's all about connecting and seeing how we can work collectively as a group of revenue leaders, to help increase culture, increase sales, and really create world-class workplaces.
Okay, great. So you're a member of Revenue Collective and RevGenius, right?
I am. I'm a member of both.
Okay, cool. Good. So and people can get in touch with you through email, I guess also on LinkedIn. I'll insert like your LinkedIn profile on that also, so they can get in touch with you.
Yep, absolutely. I appreciate it. I look forward to it. And thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think that was really nice. Learned a lot, and let me know how the kind of like Slack and open hour goes. If you do it,
I'll absolutely follow up and let you know.
Yeah, cool.